Hi everyone, welcome back to Disturbing Humanity. I am your host Jess and it is great to see you here. So, in this video, as you can see by the title, we are going to be diving into the Mexican cartel iceberg. And if you're unfamiliar with this format, basically it's the top of the iceberg is sort of the, lesser stuff that's, not really that bad, and then the deeper that you go down, sort of the worse it gets, or the more sort of fucked up it gets. It doesn't really matter if I swear in this video because I'm going to be talking about some really nasty shit. So I already know that it's probably going to be age restricted, so sorry about that. And obviously, I don't even have monetization on this channel yet. So before I get into the video anyway, I'm just gonna say a few things. If you want to skip ahead, then I will have, the timestamp things down there. So if you want to just skip my stupid rambling, then feel free. So, for those of you who do not know me, I just want to preface this with saying I am already quite a seasoned YouTuber. This is my second ever video that I'm creating on this channel, and I literally spent like 2 weeks researching this and meticulously putting all this information into a Word document of which has 6,818 words. So I've been working my ass off to do this video, so I really hope that people are going to like it because I've put so much effort and time into this, and I haven't put this much time and effort into anything in a long time in my life. So I've just, got this new motivation to really be productive and do things that I want to do, and it's all stuff I'm interested in, I didn't hate every minute of it, I was really interested. Like towards the end I was like, holy shit, it's never gonna end, I'm never gonna be able to make this video, and it's gonna take me 10 years to edit this, I know that already, and it's gonna be a really long video. So where I got the inspiration for this is I've recently been watching a new YouTuber, well, he's not that new, but he's fairly new to the scene, called Plagued Moth, and he does a lot of videos about like gore and stuff, and he's done a lot of cartel videos, and that's what sort of inspired me to do this, because he did a Not Safe for Life iceberg, and that was really interesting. I thought, oh, nobody's done a Mexican cartel iceberg, so why don't we dive into that and all of the fucked up shit that they've done. And I was trying to figure out the best way that I should rank the iceberg, if you know what I mean. So what's at the top. At the top it's just going to be butterflies and rainbows. It's not, because all cartels do fucked up shit, okay? Some of them like to lie and say, we don't do this, we don't do... Yeah, they do. They're liars, okay? They are stone cold liars, and they are atrocious, okay? They are just atrocious. Some more than others, though. But the way I've decided to rank this iceberg, and you may or may not agree with this, but I've decided to rank it of what is the most powerful and dangerous cartel today, okay? Because there's been a lot of cartels that were really strong at their time and they fell apart, but I'm doing the most dangerous cartels today, as of now. But because I was going to possibly rank them as who's done the most fucked up shit, but you know what, most of them have done a lot of really fucked up shit in their time, so I've decided this is how I wanted to rank mine. It may not have been the best format to do it, but I thought, everybody's doing these iceberg videos, and if I could somehow get my video out there because everybody's watching them, it's just an algorithm thing. So, and it's also just one way to say, here's one big video talking about all of it, instead of just, I could have done individual videos on every cartel, but I'm doing it into one bumper package for you. So this is what it is. Please be kind to me, because like I said, I did spend a lot of time putting this together, and this is definitely the most work I've ever put into a video, and I'm gonna stop rambling now and I'm just gonna get on with it. So, for those of you who are unaware, what a cartel is, basically a cartel is a criminal organization in which they basically traffic drugs mostly. Like, that's what their main purpose is. And along the way, they commit a lot of crimes. You know, it's not just drug trafficking, it's extortion, it's kidnapping, it's murder, it's torture. There's just, yeah, every fucked up thing you can think of, cartels do it. But they do it for specific reasons, although they are not justified. Because I don't want it to seem like I'm supporting them in any way, because I fucking don't. And, you know, you can come kill me all you want, cartels, okay? You'll never get to me here, and I'm never going to Mexico. So I can say what I want about them, because they're not going to kill me unless they send a hitman here to kill me. But why would they do that? Just because I'm talking shit about them? Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'm actually kind of scared now, never mind. So, we are going to dive in to every Mexican cartel. Now, this isn't every single Mexican cartel that's ever existed, but it is literally all of the ones I could pretty much find information on. Some of them were really hard to find information on, and that's also why my research took so long, because some of them, it was just really hard to find things out, and to find out what they've done was really hard as well. So, we're going to start at level 1. So we're at the top of the iceberg, and the first cartel I am going to be talking about, you've probably never heard of, because you've probably only heard of the ones that are near the bottom. Which is funny, because the top of the iceberg is supposed to normally be the shit that everybody knows and has heard of, but the way it works here is we're going down, and down at the bottom is they are, you know, fucked. Okay. So, we have the Independent Cartel of Acapulco. Don't know if I'm saying that right. Here's another disclaimer. Okay, actually, before I get into this, I just wanted to say, viewer discretion is advised. Okay? I'm saying that now, so please just, if you can't handle hearing about very, very terrible things, then, you know, probably don't watch the video. But if you're familiar with cartels, you probably already know. Right, so, and also, second disclaimer, if I mispronounce anything, I am really sorry. I actually looked up so many words of how to pronounce them, because I'm like, I ain't gonna sit here and butcher it in front of people that speak Spanish. I don't want to butcher it, okay? But I am sorry if I do. So, the Independent Cartel of Acapulco is a cartel based in the Mexican resort city of Acapulco, Guerrero. Hence the name. Also, I'm reading off a script, so sorry if I don't always give you eye contact, because I'm trying to read that, because I can't memorize like almost 7,000 words, I'm sorry. Anyway, the cartel emerged during the rapid decentralization of Mexico's drug trafficking organization, and were a splinter group of the BLO cartel, which we'll get into them in a bit. They're not on this level. The BLO originally operated in the city, but they no longer have a presence there. And after the death of Arturo Beltran Leyva, and this doesn't make sense to you because I haven't spoken about them yet, he was one of the leaders of the BLO. His brother took control of one of the factions of the cartel and declared war on Edgar Valguez Villarreal. Villarreal? I can't pronounce, I'm sorry. Who had been the right-hand man to Arturo. And you'll learn a lot about Arturo later, so just don't worry about it too much now. This is just because, you know, this cartel is not exactly big and powerful or anything like that. It's just a splinter group. So I debated whether I would add certain splinter groups, and I've added some of them, but not every single one, because once again, too many. Yeah. So, amidst the violence, Edgar tried to appoint a successor, but those in Acapulco broke off and formed their own cartel, the Independent Cartel of Acapulco. Within weeks, this cartel splintered too, so what I'm talking about has splintered from one cartel, then splintered into another cartel, which I'm not going to bother talking about, but that group was known as La Barredora, which means the sweeper truck. Edgar was then captured by federal police in 2010, but the violence between the groups for control of the city continued. They are enemies with the CJNG. Okay, next we have the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel, also known as the CSRL. And the reason why is because in Spanish they position the words differently to we do, so it's actually Cartel Santa Rosa de Lima, whereas we say Santa Rosa de Lima Cartel. Yeah. They emerged from the state of Guanajuato, which was founded in 2014 by Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, known as El Marro. That is his. A lot of them have, well, pretty much all of them have some sort of alias, and I'll let you know what they are. And I believe that it means the sledgehammer. That was at least one of his nicknames anyway. It might not be, but that's all I could see about it. And I tried looking it up, and I can't figure out what the word marrow means. So yeah. Their name refers to the town of Santa Rosa de Lima, located in the municipality of Villagrán in Guanajuato. They mainly earned income from oil theft, and in 2019, authorities launched the Timón strike operation against the cartel, bringing up to 42 detainees up to now, in addition to recovering more than 100 vehicles and searching 25 properties. This operation resulted in a wave of violence generated by the dispute of territory with the CJNG. And I didn't mention who the CJNG are yet, because once again they are further down the iceberg. You probably know who they are anyway, if you know anything about cartels, because they are one of the most famous. In 2020, El Marro was arrested along with 26 other cartel members. El Marro, however, managed to escape arrest, but then he was captured again later in the year by the government. And yeah, that's all I have about that cartel. Once again, a lot of these at the top, they don't have very much information about them because I couldn't find very much information about them, but they get much, much more detailed the further down we go, because we are still on level 1. So, next up is Los Viagras. Yeah, I'll explain the name in a second. So Los Viagras emerged in 2014 originally as a self-defense force and were asked by the Michoacán Security Commissioner Alfredo Cervantes to assist in the efforts to capture the leader of the Knights Templar cartel, who is known as El Chuta. The founding members were the Sierra Santa brothers. Their name spawns from an inside joke due to the excessive use of hair gel by one of the younger brothers with a spiky hairstyle. So I don't know if that's supposed to mean because it's like his hair took Viagra or something, because it's like sticking up like a bone or something. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of how they came up with that from that. Like, I don't know. Yes. When announcing the first attempt to disarm and dissolve the self-defense groups in late 2014, they took over the municipal presidency of Apatzingán and were violently evicted by the federal police in early 2015, and 10 civilians died during this, and a further 21 were wounded. The cartel then expanded into the drug trade, first by becoming involved in the production and transportation of methamphetamine, which brought them into a turf dispute with who other than the CJNG? I mean, who hasn't had some sort of war with them? You're gonna, understand that pretty much all of these cartels have had issues with the CJNG. And this was particularly in Tierra Caliente. In 2019, one of the cartel's hitmen was arrested and charged for committing dozens of murders. In 2020, 9 people, including 3 children, were killed by CJNG gunmen in an arcade during a turf dispute with the Viagras. And the CJNG has been unsuccessful taking territory which were held by Los Viagras in Tierra Caliente and have been in conflict for control since 2017. So yeah, Los in Spanish obviously means the, so it's just the Viagras. Okay, where are we now? Guerreros Unidos. So, now I have, from this point on, I pretty much have separated into categories where I talk about the history, I talk about their allies and their enemies, and then I talk about torture and murder that they have committed. So buckle up. History. The Guerreros Unidos were a splinter group of the BLO, here we go again, another splinter group, that formed after the death of Arturo. It was founded by Mario Casarrubias Salgado, who was known as El Sapo Guapo, who was part of the BLO security team, and Cleotilde Toribio Rentiera, known as El Tilde, who was a member of the Hit Squad. The cartel made their first public appearance in 2011 when they claimed responsibility for a triple homicide in the state of Morelos. El Tilde was arrested in 2012 and El Sapo Guapo was captured in 2014. 20 alleged cartel members were killed in a battle with the Mexican army 1 month later in an incident in which the military has been accused of human rights abuse. Allies and enemies. The cartel's main enemy is Los Rojos, which is a faction of the Gulf Cartel, who we'll also be talking about, who they have been fighting for control of drug trafficking routes. I cannot speak, I am sorry. They have also fought against the Familia Michoacana and the Knights Templar. The Mexican guerrilla group, the Insurgent People's Revolutionary Army, also declared themselves enemies of the cartel. They allegedly have an alliance with a local gang called Los Peques. Torture and murder. In 2012, the cartel carried out several high-profile attacks, including attacks on bars in Morelos that left 5 dead and 15 wounded. They also sent hitmen disguised as doctors to kill the leader of Los Rojos while he was recovering from another assassination attempt in a hospital in Mexico City. In 2014, 43 male students were forcibly abducted from Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College and then disappeared in Guerrero. They were allegedly taken into custody by local police for organised crime. It was then concluded by the government that the students were handed over to the Guerreros Unidos and then killed. Later on that year, it was announced at a press conference that several plastic bags had been found in a river in Guerrero containing human remains thought to be those of the missing students. So that is the end of level 1. Those were the 4 cartels on that level. We are now going to be moving down to level 2. And we are starting off with La Union Tepito. History. From the 1990s to the early 2010s, the leading cartel in Mexico City was the Tepito cartel, who rose to power by using their ties to the BLO cartel. After the decline of the BLO in the late 2000s, the Tepito cartel lost status, which invited the arrival of competing groups such as La Union Tepito. The group was formed between 2009 and 2012 by members of declining groups such as the BLO and Familia Michoacana, and quickly challenged the Tepito cartel for control over Mexico City. The cartel began to extort local businesses by offering high-interest loans to small business owners and street vendors with threats of physical violence for those who could not pay. They also developed ties to local police, which granted them a measure of impunity and forewarning with regard to law enforcement action. In 2017, a rival group would emerge named the Fuerza Anti-Union, which would challenge the cartel's dominance. It is believed that the group either arose as a vigilante group to combat the La Union's extortion, or as a splinter group from the cartel itself. They expanded their extortion operations into wealthier parts of the city, and in 2019, hundreds of local shopkeepers signed a letter pleading for Mexico City authorities to take action against the cartel. The leader of this association was then shot dead a week later. In 2019, a police raid captured 31 cartel members and uncovered 2 synthetic drug laboratories. The raid was triggered by reports of collusion between gang members and city authorities, according to Mexico's City Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch. I don't know how to say his name, and I'm sorry. Who claimed to have a list of around 120 police officers that may have collaborated with the cartel. So there was a lot of collusion going on there, which you'll find is actually a common theme for a lot of cartels, is they actually do collude with the police and security forces sometimes. Allies and enemies. La Union has many enemies, and from what I could find, I found that they are actually allied with the CJNG, and that appears to be the only ally that they have. They have fended off competition from smaller gangs in Mexico City, such as the Tlajoac Cartel and Los Rodolfos, and its turf war with the Fuerza Anti-Union continues unabated. Torture and murder. In 2012, 6 local drug retailers believed to have worked for the Sinaloa cartel were executed in the street. In May 2013, 12 people were kidnapped from a bar in Mexico City's Zona Rosa, including relatives of Tepito cartel leaders. In both cases, La Union Tepito was blamed. In 2018, 2 dismembered bodies and a narcomanta, which is a narcobana, were found in Mexico City with the message from La Union Tepito threatening the Fuerza Anti-Union leader. The cartel was also responsible for at least 10 murders of business leaders for them refusing to pay extortion. Next up, we have the good old BLO, because that's been mentioned like almost every time. So, history. The Beltran-Leyva brothers, get it because BL, so it's the Beltran-Leyva organization, who are Hector, Alfredo, Carlos, Arturo, and Mario, began their criminal careers working in their home state of Sinaloa with small-time opium poppy growers. And that's basically how you grow heroin with, poppies. They went on to work for Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who employed them as hitmen and transporters. There is also evidence that they worked for El Chapo, for the Guadalajara cartel, as hitmen. Their families became closer through marriage, and this connection proved critical when El Chapo was jailed in 1993, and the brothers shuttled cash to him, which helped him escape prison in 2001. This escape, the capture of Chapo's brother Arturo months later, and the death of Carrillo Fuentes opened the door for the Beltran-Leyva brothers. After many meetings with El Chapo and his partners, the group formed what would become known as the Federation or Blood Alliance. El Chapo tasked the clan with penetrating the security and political forces, which they did with alarming efficiency. In 2005, the DEA recorded a conversation between Nahum Acosta, a close advisor to the Fox administration, and one of the brothers, presumably Hector. Hector was responsible for the payroll, which allegedly included top members of the government's National Investigative Agency and the country's drug czar at the time, Noe Ramirez Manjujano. He was jailed for allegedly receiving $450,000 a month from the organization, but the charges were thrown out in 2013. In 2008, Alfredo Beltran-Leyva was arrested and jailed, and it was discovered that El Chapo had actually provided information leading to this arrest. This led to a war between the cartels, and this began with the assassination of El Chapo's son, Edgar Guzman, who was murdered as he left a Sinaloa shopping center. The BLO allied themselves with their former rivals, Los Zetas, and the Sinaloa cartel wore down the BLO by using their contacts in the federal government. In 2009, Mexican Marines killed Arturo Beltran-Leyva after he barricaded himself in an apartment. In 2010, Carlos Beltran-Leyva was arrested, and then shortly after, Hector's top security officer, Sergio Villarreal, was arrested. Hector was then arrested in 2014, and Alfredo again in 2016. Hector had a heart attack whilst in prison, which led to his death. Alfredo was sentenced to life in prison in 2017. Juan Francisco Patron Sanchez, who succeeded Hector as the head of the organization, was killed during a shootout with members of Mexico's Marines in 2017. So the cartel sort of fell apart after all of this shit happened with the brothers. So they either died or they've been jailed. Allies and enemies. The Sinaloa cartel became their biggest rival, following El Chapo providing the information that led to Alfredo's arrest. They allied with Los Zetas and were able to deal significant blows to the Sinaloa cartel in the region of Sierra Madre. They have also benefited from the assistance of longtime ally Fausto Isidro Mizer Flores, who is considered an important drug trafficker by the US. In 2014, it emerged that the BLO met with other cartels such as the Juarez cartel and the CJNG in order to mutually commit to battling the Sinaloa cartel. Torture and murder. Following the raid that killed Arturo in 2009, members of the BLO shot and killed the family of an elite Mexican Marine that had died taking part in the raid. They burst into the family's home after breaking the door with a sledgehammer, firing a spray of bullets from assault rifles. The attack appeared to be an act of revenge by the cartel. In 2012, 9 people were killed in Sinaloa as a result of a turf war between the BLO and the Sinaloa cartel. 4 of the victims were taken to a field and either shot to death or killed with machetes, and the other 5 were dumped by a river. So that is the Beltran Leyva organization. They are pretty much dead now, and they just had a lot of splinter groups come off from them. Next up is the Tijuana cartel. History. The Tijuana cartel was formed by the Arellano Phoenix brothers, Benjamin, Ramon, Francisco Rafael, Francisco Javier, and Eduardo. Before forming the cartel, they worked closely with legendary drug lord Miguel Angel Phoenix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, who was one of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel. This is the same cartel that El Chapo was originally a part of before forming the Sinaloa cartel. El Padrino was arrested in 1989, but from prison he divided up his territories, and the Arellano Phoenix brothers would get Tijuana. Shortly after his imprisonment, Ramon would kill a close associate of El Chapo in Sinaloa, causing a war between the cartels. The brothers sent gunmen to the Guadalajara airport to kill El Chapo, but instead killed a Mexican cardinal. And there'll be more about that when I talk about the Sinaloa cartel, so I'll explain it then, don't worry. Rafael was arrested in 1993, but despite this, the group would grow to unprecedented heights. When El Chapo escaped prison in 2001, a new round of fighting would begin. In 2002, Ramon went to Mazatlan to oversee the assassination of Sinaloa cartel faction leader El Mayo. However, El Mayo's men were able to kill Ramon instead. Shortly after, Mexican authorities arrested Benjamin, leaving Eduardo and his sister Enadina to lead the cartel. After completing a 10-year sentence in Mexico, Rafael was extradited to the US in 2006 and later was released on good behavior. Mexican authorities captured Javier shortly after, then Eduardo in 2008. The cartel split after his arrest. The brothers' nephew Fernando Sanchez Arellano, now known as El Ingeniero, headed up one faction, while Eduardo Teodoro Garcia Cimetel, known as El Tio, headed up another. El Tio sought an alliance with the Sinaloa cartel, while El Ingeniero allied with Los Zetas. A bloody battle ensued, but after the arrest of El Tio in 2010, the cartel appeared to consolidate again under El Ingeniero. In 2012, Eduardo was extradited to the US and was sentenced to 15 years in US prison. Rafael was assassinated in 2013, though he was no longer considered a major player. El Ingeniero was arrested in 2014, leaving his sister Enadina in charge. In 2016, following the rearrest of El Chapo, the cartel had formed an alliance with the CJNG, seeking to challenge the Sinaloa cartel. Torture and murder. The cartel reportedly bought anonymity by bribing politicians and police, and those that they could not buy, they killed. The estimated number of victims runs from 300 to well over 1,000. They killed witnesses, bystanders, policemen, police chiefs, federal police commanders, and judges. Ramon seemed to thrive on murder and would kill out of boredom, even. He would say to members, "Let's go kill someone. Who has a score to settle?" And when cars would pass by, he would ask them who they knew, and the person that they pointed out would be dead within a week. A DEA officer who witnessed the cartel's handiwork on both sides of the border said, "In my 17 years in this job, I've never seen a more violent group. They would kill people who didn't cooperate. They would kill people who didn't pay fees or tolls. They would kill people who were not necessarily disloyal. They killed them to set an example." In 1998, the cartel invaded a fishing village called El Sauzal, which was home to a drug smuggler called Fermin Castro. He paid his dues in full and on time, but the cartel decided that he might become too competitive. Gunmen arrived in the middle of the night, lined up every man, woman and child they could find against a wall, and shot them. A 15-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy were the only survivors. So that's just absolutely fucking brutal. Jesus Christ, man. Like, some of this stuff gave me nightmares. For real. And we haven't even got to the really, really bad shit yet. Ramon also developed a taste for torture and mutilation. The cartel abducted a prosecutor, 2 aides, a special prosecutor, and an army captain from the streets, and when they were found, they were unrecognizable. Almost every bone in their body had been broken. They were like sacks of ice cubes, a policeman said, and their heads had been crushed in an industrial press. Yeah, so that's some of that really nasty shit now. Like Ramon was a really, really fucked in the head guy. Ugh. In 2008, 14 Mexican drug gang members were killed and 8 others were injured in a gun battle between the Tijuana cartel and Sinaloa cartel in Tijuana. This was one of the bloodiest shootouts in the war between the 2 cartels. Okay, we are now moving down to level 3. Now, I have pretty much reserved this level for all of the cartels that were really powerful in their time, but they're pretty much like they're pretty dead now, because to be honest with you, there are 2 cartels that are incredibly powerful and dangerous in Mexico right now, and they're honestly the only ones that can really contend with shit. Like, they are ruling, like, the cartel world. So all the cartels in this level have been really powerful at some point, and they may still have some of their power, but they will never match the power of the peeps at the bottom. So I've only done 4 levels on this iceberg because I just felt like it wasn't really necessary to do like 5. I thought 4 was enough. I started out with 3, but then I realised I needed to add another level. So here we are. Right, here we are starting with the Familia Michoacana. History. The Familia Michoacana cartel emerged as a vigilante group going up against Los Zetas, who they successfully managed to drive out of Michoacan. The cartel was proudly regionalist and claimed to have won public support in Michoacan and would actively resolve local disputes, provide employment, and do social work. When the group was at the height of its power, it was one of the most potent, bloody, and powerful of Mexico's criminal organizations. They had international connections for methamphetamine distribution, including the Netherlands, India, China, and Bulgaria. Their leader, Nazario Moreno Gonzalez, known as El Chayo, was reported killed in a shootout with police in 2010. In 2011, the cartel announced their intention to completely dissolve. However, the report of El Chayo's death would later prove to be false, and it was confirmed that he was killed in 2014 in a shootout with security forces in Tumbesatio. His supposed death had triggered a split between 2 rival bosses in the group, Jose de Jesus Mendez, who was known as El Chango, and Servando Gomez, known as La Tuta. See, that name came back up, if you remember it from earlier. El Chango allied with La Resistencia, while La Tuta formed the Knights Templar cartel, which emerged in 2011. El Chango was arrested later that year and told authorities that he had been forming an alliance with Los Zetas, which suggests that he was desperate for help against the Knights Templar. After this, it was considered that the cartel was extinct, with the Knights taking over much of their operations and networks. And we're actually talking about the Knights Templar next, so don't worry about that. Allies and enemies. After working with Los Zetas to overthrow the traditional Michoacan trafficking family, the Valencias, the cartel made an announcement it was working on its own by tossing several severed heads into a nightclub in 2006. They later allied with the Sinaloa and Gulf cartels to fight Los Zetas and to expand into new territory along the US-Mexico border. They also had an ability to corrupt local government officials due to massive profits from methamphetamine production. They enjoyed deep regional loyalties thanks to social projects like building schools, roads, providing employment, and filling the police's role in settling disputes. In the early 2010s, the cartel would be involved in a bitter conflict with its successor, the Knights Templar. What is left of the cartel now is working to fend off incursions from the CJNG and smaller armed groups in southern Mexico where the group is still present. Torture and murder. The cartel has been known to be unusually violent, using torture and murder to quash rivals. As mentioned before, there was an incident in a nightclub where severed heads were tossed onto the dance floor with a message that read, "The family doesn't kill for money. It doesn't kill women. It doesn't kill innocent people, only those who deserve to die. Know that this is divine justice." Ooh, spooky. But you can't really believe what a lot of them say anyway, because they pretty much, a lot of them do kill women and children, and they just don't give a fuck whether they say they do or not. So, who knows? In 2009, a cartel lieutenant by the name of Arnoldo Rueda Medina was arrested. The cartel members responded by attacking the federal police station in Morelia to try and free him, and during the attack, 2 soldiers and 3 federal policemen were killed. 3 days later, the cartel tortured and murdered 12 Mexican federal police agents and dumped their bodies along the side of a mountain highway with a message saying, "So that you come for another, we will be waiting for you here." So, yeah, they had some real power going there. In 2020, police found the burned bodies of 12 suspected members of the CJNG in Michoacan stacked on the back of a pickup truck that was abandoned by members of the Familia Michoacana. These murders were thought to be a response to the CJNG killing a suspected member of the cartel, and a message was left behind saying, "Forgive me, Chitacano. I forgot your Mother's Day gift, but I send it to you here." Chitacano is reportedly the head of the CJNG operations in Michoacan, just in case you were wondering. Next up we have Knights Templar. History. The Knights Templar cartel emerged in 2011 as a splinter group of the Familia Michoacana and cast themselves as a self-defense movement engaged in a struggle with Mexico's larger cartels on behalf of the Michoacan population. They hung banners throughout Michoacan saying that they would now be carrying out the altruistic activities that were previously performed by the Familia Michoacana. This came after the false death report of El Cheo. The cartel takes its name from a medieval military religious order charged with defending pilgrims on their journey to the Holy Land, whose members were known for their fearlessness on the battlefield. The name choice is part of the cartel's bid to be seen as more than just a drug gang. Members use Roman warrior-type helmets during induction ceremonies and promote themselves as champions of the fight against materialism, injustice, and tyranny. In addition to drug trafficking, the cartel received a large amount of income from extorting businesses in their area. These extortion activities are aided by their influence over local government officials, achieved through intimidation, and handing over kickbacks from drug profits. The killing of the cartel's leader El Cheo and their second-in-command Enrique Plancate, known as El Caic, I think that's how you say it, I don't know, in the span of just a few weeks in 2014 left the cartel's leadership largely but debilitated. Servando Gomez, La Tuta, took over the central command until he was captured in 2014 by Mexican security forces. As of 2017, it is believed that the cartel has ceased to exist after their leader Pablo Toscano Padilla, known as El 500, and his lieutenant Ezequiel Castaneda, known as El Chex, were reported to have been killed by remnants of the Familia Michoacana while on their way to a meeting with members of the CJNG to form an alliance with them. Allies and enemies. The cartel has been involved in a bitter conflict with the remnants of the Familia Michoacana. They also run out of many cities in Michoacan by self-defense groups, who were backed by government forces. Many of the cartel's members are believed to have defected to other criminal groups, including the self-defense forces. Torture and murder. The cartel reportedly ran an organ trafficking ring and forced new recruits to prove their loyalty through acts of cannibalism. At these initiation ceremonies, they forced members to eat human hearts. The majority of these hearts came from local children who had been kidnapped for organ trafficking purposes. They would also dismember people that they intended to kill. So that's definitely one of the most fucked up things that I've ever heard, is that they ate children's hearts. They made new recruits eat children's hearts. Like, you just can't make this shit up. I mean, you can, but oh man, like, they really just do some of the worst things you've heard. And obviously a lot of cartels have made videos online, and thankfully I don't think a video doesn't exist of that, because I would have heard about it, I'm pretty sure. In 2011, 23 people were killed in a massacre in Michoacan due to conflict between the Knights Templar and the Familia Michoacana. The bodies were accompanied by notes from the cartel accusing them of supporting El Chango, who was the leader of Familia. The first 9 bodies were discovered in the port city of Lázaro Cárdenas, which is a key territory for importing cocaine and methamphetamine. 9 more bodies were later discovered at points in the state's northern region, which borders the state of Jalisco. Moving on to Los Zetas, which you may have heard of. History. Los Zetas began as a group of deserters from an elite unit of the armed forces at the service of the Gulf Cartel, and would become one of the most powerful and feared cartels in Mexico before the loss of leaders started their decline. Heriberto Lazcano, known as El Lazca, was the leader of the cartel until he was killed in a shootout with the Mexican Navy in 2012. The cartel's military training helped catapult them into power, and they became known for their use of state-of-the-art weapons and communication technology. By 2010, they had established a presence in 405 Mexican municipalities, which was over twice as many as their nearest rivals. They were in a constant war with the Gulf Cartel over control of the border state of Tamaulipas, and became embroiled in numerous other cartel wars across Mexico, including the Sinaloa cartel. During this time, they built up a network of international drug trafficking contacts through Central America to Colombia, and also began to profit from everything from kidnapping migrants to pirating DVDs. By 2012, the cartel was starting to fall apart, and what would ultimately cause a split was the failing relationship between the Trevino brothers, Miguel and Alejandro, who divided into rival factions, the Northeast Cartel and the Zetas Old School. The cartel was further undermined by a series of high-profile blows to the leadership, the most serious being the loss of El Lazca. The Trevino brothers were also both arrested. With no clear leadership, the cartel has broken into splinter groups. Allies and enemies. Los Zetas made a lot of temporary alliances with groups such as the Familia Michoacana and the BLO. Their biggest enemies were their former parent organisation, the Gulf Cartel, and of course the Sinaloa Cartel. Torture and murder. Los Zetas were known for their horrific mass killings and gladiator-style fights to the death. It has been said that the group has been considered more brutal than the CJNG, which I honestly disagree with that. I don't know who said that, but when we get to the CJNG, you'll understand why I'm saying that. Their specialised training and terrible tactics are the reason for this. One of the methods they used was boiling victims in 55-gallon drums or setting them on fire while they are still alive. El Lazca reportedly fed rivals to his exotic pets, lions and tigers. He would then apparently eat their flesh from their arse or something like that, I read somewhere. I don't know if that's true, but whatever, nothing surprises me with these cartels. He would force the people into cages and allowed an audience to watch them be murdered by the animals. And I don't know why you would want to see that, but you know, here we are. Some female victims were raped, and some male victims were made to fight to the death with other hostages with hammers and machetes. Survivors were forced to become hitmen for the cartel, whereas the losers went into mass graves. So that's really, really fucking scary. Imagine that, like, you're given a weapon and then you're supposed to just fight for your life against other people. It's just, oh, it's so horrible to think about. Like, ugh. Marciano Milan Vasquez was an alleged hitman for the cartel and was involved in a kidnapping in 2013 of a former drug trafficking associate. He had been kidnapped following a shipment of narcotics being seized, and Vasquez wanted retribution for the failure to compensate the lost goods. The man was blindfolded, and when the blindfold was removed, he was forced to watch as Vasquez brutally attacked a 6-year-old girl with an axe, throwing her limbs into a fire, then repeating the same action on her parents. His reason for doing this was reportedly so he could be remembered. He is now serving 7 consecutive life sentences for his crimes, which include murder and drug trafficking. Yeah, that one was hard. Like, I will admit that is one of the worst things that I've heard. They are just disgusting, like, just so bad. But that, you know, that was the actions of just one of the guys, you know, and it was really hard to research this without it, like, affecting me, and I had to take breaks here and there so that I didn't become consumed by this, because reading about these things, like, it's hard to even imagine it in real life, but even just trying to imagine it is horrific enough at thinking, you know, that it actually happened. It's just so bad to think about, honestly. Just what a waste of life for just no reason at all. And that's really what these cartels do. They just kill people for no reason. Like, even if you have a reason, it doesn't justify killing someone. Like, the only time I think I would ever condone somebody killing someone is if they had killed your family or something like that, or they, you know, but even then it's like, should you kill another human being? But, you know, these are questions that we have to ask, you know, it's not exactly relevant, but anyway. In 2010, the cartel carried out a mass murder of 72 immigrants from Central and South America, which is known as the San Fernando Massacre. The victims were murdered in execution-style shootings before piling them all together in a mass grave. 1 year later, authorities discovered another nearby mass grave, which contained 193 bodies. So yeah, I wasn't lying when I said they're known for their massacres. It's just absolutely crazy how many people they've killed. Los Zetas is also a cartel that you might recognise as posting some of their horrific torture and murder videos online. In one such video that surfaced in 2017, showed 2 Los Zetas gunmen insulting rival gangs behind a shirtless kneeling man who claim that he is part of a rival gang who was sent to commit crimes in Ciudad Victoria. One of the gunmen then pulls out a meat cleaver and cuts the victim's throat, decapitates him, and places his severed head on his back. Now, according to my friend, who, by the way, shout out to my friend Josh, he helped me do some of the research for this video, and I also made him watch a couple of videos because he's seen, like, many cartel execution videos. I am proud to say right now, I have seen that many. How many do I intend to see in my lifetime? Yeah. I accidentally saw the first few seconds of a cartel video, and I turned that shit off immediately when I saw that the guy's face was completely gone, and even that haunted me. Honestly, I believe I would give myself, like, well, I believe that I would mentally collapse if I had to see even one of these videos. Like, it would just destroy me, okay? Like, I can't, those are just the one thing I can't cope with. So, I have not seen any of these videos, but I know someone who has. So I relied on him to tell me about some of these things, Because yeah, I will just never, I can't cope with it. Like, hearing about it is bad enough. Seeing it, no thank you. I don't need that burned into my brain forevermore. So I strongly advise, just don't watch them. The curiosity is never worth it. It just isn't, okay? Unless you've got like a really strong mind, a strong stomach, you don't get really fazed by things, then please God don't, because I also have a weak stomach, as well as being weak-minded. So it's not good for people like me to see that stuff. I'm gonna lose my voice by the end of this video, I swear. I never talk this much, except maybe sometimes, I don't know. Whatever. Gulf Cartel. History. The Gulf Cartel is one of the oldest and most powerful Mexican cartels, but has lost territory and influence in recent years to its rivals. Their leader, Ocio Cardenas Guillen, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, was considered the country's most powerful underworld leader. The cartel's origins can be traced to 1984, when Juan Garcia Abrego gained control of his uncle's drug trafficking business. When he was arrested and deported to the US in 1996, the cartel was reportedly pulling in billions in revenue each year. Ocio Cardenas Guillen was Abrego's heir, and he developed the cartel's military wing, recruiting at least 31 former soldiers of Mexico's special forces to act as security enforcers for at least 3 times their previous pay. They were expert sharpshooters and trained in weapons that were inaccessible to most of their rivals. Cardenas was arrested in 2003 following the $2 million bounty that was placed on his head. Today, the cartel has managed to stick around despite internal divisions and ongoing wars from rival cartels. Cardenas was extradited to the US in 2007, so he was replaced by Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez, known as El Cos, until he was captured in 2012. Cardenas' brother Antonio Cardenas Guillen, known as Tony Tormenta. I like how most of these other people, they are known as El something, and he's just, I'm Tony Tormenta. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to make jokes because, you know, this is some really horrific shit I'm talking about, so sometimes a bit of comic relief is needed, I feel like, and if anybody knows who Plagued Moth is, that's exactly what he does too. Like, he will literally be watching a gore video and he'll make some stupid joke, like, in the midst of it, and it's just so strange, but it's like a weird human response to horrific situations. Like, we try to make light of them to make it easier on us and make it easier on others. That's just an interesting piece of psychology for you. It's dying. So Tony Tormenta, he handled the cartel's drug trafficking business until he was gunned down by the Mexican Navy in Matamoros in 2010. In 2013, David Salgado, known as El Metro 4, one of the contenders to succeed El Cos, was murdered by unknown assassins. So you must have noticed by now, with a lot of these cartels, they normally just get gunned down by, you know, federal police, Mexican forces, whatever, the Navy. A lot of them end up dead, the leaders of the cartels. A lot of them don't make it out alive, and if they do, a lot of them in prison. So, you know, Mexico, I feel like it's criticised for not being able to control the cartels, but to be honest, they really have captured and killed a lot of cartel leaders. That's what I've noticed, because I've watched a few like documentaries and stuff like that here and there, and obviously there's collusion within the police and the government and what have you, but you know, they still did really capture and kill a lot of leaders. So I mean, it's corrupted as fuck in Mexico, and honestly, my advice to anybody is don't go on holiday in Mexico, because you could actually end up dead if you end up somewhere where there's some sort of cartel war going on. Honestly, it's not even worth the risk. Like, yes, Cancun is beautiful, but there's been some shit that's happened there, and it's actually really dangerous for tourists now. So I know I'm never going there because I don't ever want to be caught up in something like that. And, you know, a lot of them kill innocent people if they get in the way. So fuck that is all I'm going to say. But, you know, enter at your own risk. But after reading all of this and all the information I have now, I'm like, hell to the no. Anyway, eventually, Julian Manuel Loaiza Salinas, known as El Comandante Toro, assumed leadership of the group and commanded a group of hitmen in the border town of Reynosa. However, he would also be gunned down by Mexican forces in 2017. Shortly after, yet another leader was captured by the Mexican army by the name of Jose Antonio Ramo Lopez, known as La Hamburguesa, which means the hamburger. I don't know why he was called that, but it's an interesting name at least. Jose Alfredo, another Jose, Cardenas Martinez, known as El Contador, the nephew of Cardenas Guillen, was the only one of the group leaders that remained. However, he was arrested in 2018 in Tamaulipas. So the Gulf Cartel went to shit basically after that. Like, they all got killed and captured, and then that's what happens. Like, these cartels do fall apart when their leaders die or are in jail, but then a lot of them do splinter off and form their own cartels, and then the cycle repeats again. Allies and enemies. In 2010, it was confirmed that there was an alliance between the Gulf Cartel and the Familia Michoacana against their common rival Los Zetas, who had been pushing aggressively into Tamaulipas. A previous alliance set up between Cardenas and Benjamin Arino Phoenix, one of the leaders of the Tijuana cartel, held for about a year until the agreement broke down in 2006, leading to another outbreak of murders in the border states. Torture and murder. The Gulf Cartel are known for their extremely high number of kidnappings, for example when 68 victims were found in a safe house in Reynosa in 2011. They even use sports stars to carry out their kidnappings, including FC Monterrey star Omar Ortiz and Lucha Libre wrestler Lazaro Guerrero. In the US, the cartel has been responsible for several kidnappings, mainly in the McAllen metropolitan area. When victims are kidnapped on US territory, they are usually hidden in the trunk of a car and taken to Mexico. They have also been involved in human trafficking and extortion, particularly targeting businesses in Tamaulipas. So there wasn't a hell of a lot of information on murders and things that they carry out. So in there, you know, I just put basically crimes that they've committed rather than, you know, torture and murder as such. And a lot of them I had to search for like news articles that were explaining things that had happened, because there was nowhere that just had all of this information. It's just, yeah, I had to do actual research. It was like I was doing it for like a huge assignment. Like, honestly, if this was an assignment, like I nailed this shit, I feel like. Okay, moving on to the Juarez cartel. History. The Juarez cartel is one of the oldest and most powerful cartels in Mexico. Since the cartel began, it has focused on drug trafficking, but began expanding to other criminal activities such as human trafficking, kidnapping, and extortion. They are based in the city of Juarez, in the state of Chihuahua. Origins go back to the 80s when the Ciudad de Juarez... Sorry, my stomach just made a noise and I was like, what the fuck was that? When the Ciudad de Juarez area was under Rafael Aguilar Guajardo's control. He worked closely with the Guadalajara cartel, and after the arrest of the cartel's leader, he was granted control of Juarez. In mysterious circumstances, Guajardo was murdered in Cancun in 1993. His lieutenant Amado Carrillo Fuentes, known as El Señor de los Cielos, assumed control. And if you're wondering what that means, it means Lord of the Skies. El Señor de los Cielos, if I said that right. The cartel grew under Fuentes' control, and eventually he controlled at least half of all Mexican trafficking and expanded operations to Central America and South America. His alias was Lord of the Skies, like I said, due to him using the method of moving thousands of tons of Colombian cocaine into Mexico by air, then into US by land. He died abruptly in 1997 due to complications that occurred during plastic surgery, and the two physicians that performed this surgery were later found dead inside steel drums with their bodies showing signs of torture. So that was their act of revenge for the plastic surgeon fucking up and killing the guy. So, yeah, that was quite an interesting way to find out that someone died. When I read it, I was like, what? He died during plastic surgery? But yeah, after his death, his brothers, Vicente and Rodolfo, took over, but a power struggle quickly ensued. After some infighting, the two brothers and their nephew Vicente Carrillo Leyva established a firm command. In 2002, they allied with Juan Jose Esparragoza Moreno, a former member of the Mexican police, Ismael Zambada, known as El Mayo, the Beltran Leyva brothers, and El Chapo. Rodolfo killed two of El Chapo's associates for not paying him to use the Juarez corridor, so in retaliation, El Chapo ordered a hit on him. He was killed with his wife as they left a movie theatre in 2004. Chapo's brother Arturo was then killed only a few months later in retaliation by Vicente. Today, the cartel is still battling rival groups in its traditional stronghold around Ciudad Juarez. More than 1,200 homicides were committed there in 2018, which was the first time the city had recorded more than 1,000 murders since 2011. Allies and enemies. The cartel's main rival is the Sinaloa cartel, and has then turned to their former rivals Los Zetas and the Beltran Leyva organization to help push them back. Recently, a battle has resurged in the border state of Chihuahua between the Juarez and Sinaloa cartel over control of key smuggling routes into the US. They have also sought more direct contact with drug sources in Colombia with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. Torture and murder. The Juarez cartel has been responsible for a number of murders, including a massacre that occurred between the states of Sonora and Chihuahua, in which 9 deaths occurred, 6 of which were children and 3 were women. They have been known for beheading their rivals, mutilating their corpses, and dumping them in public places in order to instill fear into their rivals and even the general public. At an abandoned house near the Texas-Mexico border, the cartel carried out torture and killings from 2003 to 2004, when a mass grave was discovered containing at least 12 bodies. This has been dubbed the House of Death by the media, or the Juarez House of Death. Okay, so my camera actually just ran out of space. Jesus Christ. Okay, well, we have made it to level 4, guys. And now we are finally going to talk about the 2 most dangerous and powerful cartels currently operating in Mexico. So, first up we have the very famous Sinaloa cartel, which we have mentioned many times in these other cartels' descriptions. And it is led by the famous El Chapo. So, let's get into the history. Often described as the largest and most powerful drug trafficking organization in the Western Hemisphere, the Sinaloa cartel is an offshoot of the Guadalajara cartel. One of the first men to traffic marijuana in bulk was Pedro Aviles, who brought his friend's son Joaquin Guzman Loera, who is El Chapo, into the business. In the 70s, they began moving cocaine for Colombian and Central American traffickers and shifted their operations to the state of Jalisco. Aviles was killed during a police shootout in 1978. In 1985, they murdered an undercover drug enforcement agent by the name of Enrique Camarena. Over the course of 30 hours, they broke his skull, jaw, nose, cheekbones, and windpipe, injecting him with drugs to make sure that he stayed conscious. Fucking barbaric. Pressure from the US forced Mexican authorities to act, and this made the cartel leaders flee to different parts of Mexico, except El Chapo and his partner Hector Luis Palma Salazar, who remained in the Sinaloa area. In 1992, El Chapo sent 40 gunmen to raid a Tijuana cartel party in Puerto Vallarta, killing 9 people. The Tijuana cartel responded by trying to assassinate El Chapo at the Guadalajara airport in 1993, but ended up killing a Mexican cardinal. Do you remember that I mentioned earlier, that I said I was going to talk about? Well, if you don't know what a cardinal is the most senior member of the clergy of the Catholic Church, and they are nominated by the Pope. And they're basically just like a step down from the Pope. So El Chapo then fled to Guatemala, where he was arrested 2 weeks later. Palma Salazar was arrested in 1995. El Chapo was able to maintain some control from prison and pass messages through his lawyers. In 2001, he escaped from prison and assumed a leadership role in the cartel. He was then recaptured, then escaped again, then recaptured again in 2016. In 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the US, which sparked a wave of violence due to internal power struggles within the cartel and efforts from other criminal groups to expand their operations in his absence. Allies and enemies. The Sinaloa cartel's main bond is through blood, since many of the members are related by birth or marriage. They have created new alliances with former enemies in the Gulf Cartel and the Familia Michoacana, as well as negotiating a pact with the Tijuana cartel. They have established strong connections to Mexico's political and economic elite, as well as penetrating the government and security forces. They often opt for bribes over bullets, but is not above organising forces to overrun areas they want to control. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, who we'll be talking about next, the CJNG, are the Sinaloa cartel's primary enemy, and the cartel was created after the death of former Sinaloa cartel capo Ignacio Coronel, known as Nacho. These 2 cartels are deemed the most dominant organised crime groups in Mexico. So now let's talk about torture and murder. The Sinaloa cartel is known for its chainsaw beheadings and drugging torture victims. They have killed women and children and have been known to rape family members of their rivals and force them to watch. And honestly, that really got to me as well, because I just couldn't imagine like what that must be like for those people. It's just some of the most vile shit that I've heard. They also inject victims with adrenaline and other substances that affect the central nervous system in order to keep them conscious, to enhance the responses of pain receptors during slow, prolonged torture. Chainsaw beheadings were known to be a favoured method by El Chapo, and a video surfaced online of him beheading victim Hugo Hernandez. His face was then peeled off after he was killed and stitched onto a football, which is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard, but like, okay then. The football was then found in a plastic bag near City Hall with a note saying, "Happy New Year, because this will be your last." I don't know who that was actually addressed to, but yeah, that, just imagine that. Imagine you look in you see a football in a bag, and then you look and it's a human face stitched onto it. I couldn't find any pictures or anything of that, but I don't know if I'd be allowed to show it anyway. But yeah. They have also put people in drums and boiled them or set them on fire, which seems to be quite popular method that some of these cartels use for some reason. Like, they basically make like human soup in these drums. It's just so disgusting and horrific. And officials have reported that the Sinaloa is responsible for much of the cartel-linked violence that has left around 80,000 people dead in Mexico since 2006. How absolutely insane is that? Can you, like, I just can't even believe that it's real. Yeah, that is the famous Sinaloa cartel, and I am very glad that El Chapo is in prison where he belongs. So, I have saved the best for last, and by best I mean worst, as in this cartel is the most fucked shit that I have researched. It really truly is, and you've heard their name everywhere, the CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, also known as Cartel Jalisco Nuevo Generacion, I don't know how to say that. And you're about to hear why. So let's get into the history. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel emerged after former Sinaloa cartel capo Ignacio Coronel, Nacho, was killed by Mexican security forces in 2010. Nemesio Oseguera Ramos, known as El Mencho, you may have heard that name somewhere, because he actually currently has a $10 million bounty on his head. Yeah, and yeah, he still hasn't been captured. He is considered the founder and leader of the cartel. They have been associated with the use of extreme violence, and after they emerged, homicides, disappearances, and discoveries of mass graves spiked in Jalisco. In 2015, they killed 15 Mexican police officers during an ambush in Jalisco state, which is recorded as one of the single deadliest attacks on security forces in recent Mexican history. They were also blamed for an attack that killed 5 federal police officers and shooting down a military helicopter. They are also responsible for high-profile attacks against public officials. In 2018, they attempted to assassinate Luis Carlos Nejera, the former security secretary of Jalisco, and in 2020 they attempted to kill Omar Garcia Harfuch. I don't know how to say. Is it Harfuch? Is it Harfuch? Is it Harfuch? I don't know. Which I mentioned him earlier, if you remember. Actually, he's Mexico City's public security secretary. They successfully killed a judge that had tried cases against members of the cartel, along with his wife. They have been known to appeal to Mexican citizenry with their idealistic propaganda, such as promising to rid its areas of operation of other crime syndicates such as Los Zetas and Knights Templar. In 2020, they distributed toys to children in communities in Veracruz, where they were fighting splinter groups from Los Zetas in order to win over the local families, which is crucial for the cartel's territorial control. So this is also a thing that some cartels do, is they go and give gifts to local communities to sort of get them on their side, because it can be quite important to have the community on their side, which, you know, can help them with things like people being lookouts and things like that. Allies and enemies. The CJNG's longest ally was Los Queenies, led by Abigail Gonzalez Valencia, known as El Queenie, El Mencho's brother-in-law. El Queenie was responsible for managing the financial operations of the CJNG and Los Queenies. The CJNG's biggest enemy is, of course, the Sinaloa cartel. They are brutal enemies, and there has been a lot of bloodshed due to their rivalry, and they, of course, they're the 2 biggest cartels in Mexico, so they're obviously going to be fighting against each other. You know, it's just the way things go, really, because they want as much territory as they possibly can get, so they'll be fighting for that territory. In 2016, they actually managed to kidnap El Chapo's son, Alfredo Guzman, and 6 others from a restaurant in Puerto Vallarta in Jalisco. The CJNG also has smaller localized rivals as a result of the fragmentation which has broken up many of Mexico's larger criminal groups. They have also allied with some of these smaller gangs, such as the remnants of the Tijuana cartel and with a faction of the Juarez cartel. In the state of Guanajuato, the cartel has been in a bloody war with the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel, who we mentioned earlier, which is led by El Marro. The battle has revolved around control of oil theft and led to Guanajuato becoming the most violent state in Mexico. On the Atlantic coast, the cartel moved into Veracruz, where they faced the Old School Zetas, a splinter group of Los Zetas, and a faction of the Gulf cartel known as Grupo Sombra. In 2019, they massacred 14 people in the municipality of Manatlan, a stronghold of the old school Zetas. One of their oldest enemies was the Knights Templar, which has now fragmented into smaller organisations, as you know. The largest of these groups is Los Viagras, which has frequently clashed with the CJNG. Now we get into the horrible shit they've done. So, torture and murder. The CJNG are known for their ruthless brutality and have been responsible for many kidnappings, murders, and even cannibalism. They have posted some of this brutal torture and murder online, such as a video of a cartel member slicing open a man's chest cavity with a machete, ripping out his heart, then cutting off a piece of the heart and eating it. So, much like we heard before with the heart eating, yeah, that's something the CJNG do as well. And also, their initiation into the cartel requires cannibalism. Like, the recruits are told to eat pieces of human flesh or human organs, and if they refuse, they're dead. So they don't even have a choice. It's just so disgusting. And I made my poor friend Josh watch the video, and his verdict was, yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's really bad. And he's like, he left out some of the details of it, and then I was like, oh, I want to know the details. And then when he was like giving me a description of the video, I just died inside. It's so horrific. I could never watch that in my life. That is some of the most horrific shit I've heard. Oh. They've also tortured, murdered, and mutilated rival gang members and hung their bodies from bridges with warning notes attached to them. One of these men were Adolfo Mendoza Valencia, who can be seen here surrounded by heavily armed members of the cartel. In March of this year, they murdered Carlos Sanchez, known as El Cholo, a former lieutenant of the CJNG, as he decided to turn against them and create his own cartel, known as the New Plaza Cartel. His body was found on a park bench in Tlaquepaque. I don't know if that's how you say it. Covered in plastic with knives fixing into his chest and legs, one of which said, "The traitor El Cholo." A video had surfaced hours before his body was discovered, where he was surrounded by heavily armed members of the CJNG, where he is admitting to having reached a deal with Mexico's security chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch. Yeah, the same one they tried to assassinate in order to combat the cartel. So, and they've also been known for the famous video, the famous Dynamite video, where there is a man and a child, a boy, and they have dynamite strapped to their chests, and they light the dynamite and explosion. But that video is not that bad because you don't actually see what happens, because obviously the camera person would die if they were right there in front of dynamite, so they obviously, all of the people there gain a lot of distance, and you just see a lot of smoke up in the air, so you don't actually see that happen. But yeah, they're known for having really creative ways of torturing and killing people, and they have been one of the most prominent cartels that have posted this stuff online. It's just horrible, absolutely horrible, and I had to be really careful when I was researching this so I didn't accidentally see something. And actually I did accidentally see a thumbnail of a guy that was beheaded, but I don't even know if that was linked to cartels. But yeah, like I said, my friend Josh has seen a lot of these videos. I haven't explained, I haven't said every video they've ever posted, just the most awful ones that I've seen. And yeah, they are brutal, absolutely brutal, don't give a fuck psychopaths. And a lot of people are forced into, you know, joining cartels and stuff, these recruits, and they don't actually sign up for it. And yeah, like, my brain is honestly absolutely fried after this. I do apologise if I have left out any details, but like I said, I had a lot to cover here. And I spent a lot of time doing it as well, that I almost did actually lose my mind from getting this all down. So yeah, I don't even know what to say now. I got most of my information from a great website called Insight Crime. They have like so much information on there about cartels, but I also got some stuff from Wikipedia. I got some stuff from just news sources. So I apologise if any of it isn't factually correct, but I did try to make sure that I was checking what I was reading to make sure that it, you know, was correct. But that is the Mexican cartel iceberg. And yeah, the two like biggest operating cartels in Mexico right now are the Sinaloa and the CGNG, and I think that with El Chapo in prison, the CGNG is definitely, I would say it is the #1 most powerful cartel in Mexico, and El Mencho is still at large. They haven't captured him. They have a $10 million bounty on his head. So I think they right now are definitely in the strongest position. And yeah, all I can say is that I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm sorry that it took me so long to do this. Like, I bet you thought that I abandoned this channel already, didn't you? Like, if you already know me and you watched my first video, because this is my second video, you probably thought, she's already given up. But no, I've been working on this the whole time. So yeah, I have motivation, which, you know, I don't always have motivation because I struggle with mental health issues, so it can sometimes be really hard for me to do this stuff, because it does take a lot out of you. It is like, you know, it is kind of like work. You know, I had to put a lot of work into this, and, you know, I'm not going to get paid for it. I'm just doing it because I want to do it. It's interesting and I want to share it with people. So I really hope that you liked it. Give me some constructive criticism. Like, don't just hate on me. Don't just say it was shit. Just say you could have done this better, or if I missed anything out that you thought I should have mentioned, then maybe talk about that in the comments, or let me know in the comments if you have seen any of these cartel videos and what you thought about them and how it affected you. And honestly, before I did this, I didn't really know anything about cartels, so now this has really opened my eyes to the world. And obviously this was just Mexico's cartels specifically, and yeah, the reason why I was intrigued to do it once again is because of the videos, and that's what made me look into it. So I'll let you go now, because my voice is pretty much gone and I'm dead. So thank you. Oh, one more thing I wanted to address, and I haven't addressed already. Yes, I changed my name because I wanted it to be something a bit more fitting for the channel. I know it sounds a bit weird, like disturbing humanity, because I sound like just one of those like kind of faceless channels or whatever, and then they're normally like men. I guess it sounds like a manly name, I guess, but you know, it's me. I am not a man. I just wanted to have more of a brand for myself, if that makes sense. So I hope that's okay with you. If it's not, then I will. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.